It is my great pleasure to introduce Janice Deal. She, as you just heard, she has completed an amazing collection of short stories, some of which have been published in literary magazines, including The Sun, the Ontario Review, and the Carolina Quarterly. One of her stories was selected to be reprinted in a new anthology that's going to be coming from Ohio University Press. The name of the collection is going to be called New Stories from the Midwest. Jan is a recipient of an Illinois Arts Council Fellowship Award for Prose, and she is a wonderful manuscript reader. And what she doesn't know is that I count her among the people I go to when I'm having a very bad writing day. And I always know that Jan will have a new insight to share with me, and somehow her words are always the exact right words I need to hear. So thank you. Jan will be reading from her novel in progress, which has a working title of Blood and Bone. Jan Deal.
Is that okay, John? Okay. All right, this is just going to be the first chapter, and the way I'm envisioning this novel is that it'll come from different points of view. This is from the point of view of a character named Dixie, and the chapter is called The Smell of Water. Dixie drove north, through the iron fields, the sky secreting raw pink beyond a line of tamarack. Wasn't there a crayon like that? Flesh, she thinks, fleshy. The way Mom looked the last time Dixie saw her, 6 months ago, or maybe 8. Too long ago, Val would have said, but that was Val. Dixie was coming now, wasn't she? Their mother, Barbara, always as sinewy and taut as a piece of jerky, had suddenly grown round and malleable at 66, fleshy, with a noticeable swag of skin below the chin and a pot belly that pushed at her sweatshirt like a little fist. I love my sweets, Mom had said, her mouth and chin trembling the way they do now, defensive about, betrayed by, her body after all these years. And it was true. The little wastebasket in her room was suddenly, consistently full of brown and green wrappers, Milky Ways. And hadn't Dixie helped eat them, foregoing her diet because Milky Ways tasted good? Her mother was fat. The house was gone, and the farm. Hell, it was stressful to be home, not home because Chicago was that, and had been for years, but the place she came from, Ladysmith. Past the Milky Ways, Ma. That wind, rocking the car. Dixie is used to getting up early for work. She'll drive in early instead of taking the L when she's got a deadline. The street's still dark and creeping, but this is different, this pell-mell flight so urgent and strange. Even the Kennedy was lonely when she first merged on 2-3 hours ago at 4 a.m. or just after. Frail cirrus latticed the sky like frost on a window, and the unfriendly wind knocks her car so that Dixie wishes she drove something big, something substantial. A Hummer you need, Drago used to tease, squeezing into the front passenger seat of her Honda and reminding her what a single-lady car she had. Like a wee little librarian, he sang in that thick, dark baritone of his. Everything about Drago was thick. He had big arms, too, and since he worked out, a broad torso like a squadron leader. That was back when the teasing was affectionate, because she did find out how shrill, almost hectoring, he could be. Dixie thinks about Drago, his pillowy lips, and then she thinks of Uncle Moon, who had to be a father to her all those years. Moon, Mom's brother, wasn't like Drago. He never said anything. He was smart that way, staying mute in a house of women. But yeah, he would have had an opinion about the car too. A crappy little rice burner, that's what her Uncle Moon would have said. He drove Buicks all through her childhood. Dixie misses him. Hell, everything about her could be different. She glances at herself in the rear view and presses her lips tight. That flat wafer face, round and white as dough, is prettier with makeup the way she likes to do. Bright blue at the eyes so that they are lit like tropical fish, and a vivid lipstick. Her signature color, something bold and out there to make up for the fact that she's not pretty, never been pretty, not like Val. At 42, that shouldn't matter anymore. She should have grown beyond that. And when she and Drago lived together, she thought she might. Today, though, gray lips and hair mashed flat, Val had called her at 4 a.m., her voice strident and pissed. The usual, so it was only the hour that got Dixie scared. "What?" Dixie rasped into the phone. "What now?" One hand flailed for her glasses, lost in the sheets where Drago used to sleep, lost with the book she'd been reading when she nodded off. The light was still on. Her breath was sour. She found the glasses, the thin wire frames bent, and pressed them on. The little bedroom sprang into focus, gray as riverstone. She had picked the color with Drago. He has an elegant taste, and when they painted the room together, he had instilled in her a vision of what their home could be: cool, elegant simplicity, a place of rest. Drago resisted mess and entropy, and when he still lived here, he kept those demons at bay. But as soon as he left, it was as if a dam burst. Now books pile on the floor next to her bed, in a pyre before the dresser, and on the nightstand, 2 stacks tilt, crusted with receipts and cards and interleaved with Post-its, their penciled reminders forgotten, the gummed adhesive strips brittle, so that when Dixie shifted the books in search of one elusive title, the paper squares leapt and fluttered like bats. Sometimes it worries Dixie that the clutter doesn't bother her. She wonders if such sloth is a sign of depression, to which, admittedly, she is prone, but then she will take pleasure in one small thing, the Rothko poster, say, from the Guggenheim that hangs right across from her bed. And she will think, never mind. Drago had dismissed the poster as cliché, as depressing. He'd claimed that he hated waking to it in the mornings. But she loves its dim soul. "You'll come now," Val said. "No hello even," as if she weren't the younger sister, the one who'd made the choices she had. Not that there was anything wrong with marrying so young. If anyone had asked her, that is what Dixie would have said, would have insisted even. "I am about to have a nervous breakdown, and I need you here." "Okay," Dixie said, not too civil about it. But she'd hauled tail then, hadn't she? Thrown some clothes into a suitcase, choosing the battered American Tourister she used in college because Val would have something to say about the new tan Schlesinger Dixie picked up for her work trips. Better to play it low-key. And she'll only be there for a couple of days, tops. Val said Mom had had a stroke, and that's one thing Dixie will say for her. Val isn't given to exaggeration, but surely Mom will get through this one, the way she has before. Dixie cracks her window, and the air, frigid, smells clean and good, like the forest she'll pass through soon enough, the stands of spruce and heart-leaved birch, soft loaves of moss underfoot. She loves the smell, though she has never loved where she came from. Even when she was a girl, she knew she would leave Ladysmith. She knew she would leave Wisconsin. At 8 years old, she was already thick and bookish, her role set. Barbara would murmur approvingly, "You'll bust the seams of this place, girl." And Dixie clung to this interpretation of who she, Dixie, was, the smart one, and talented enough on the piano to believe that when she left this place, it would be the music that took her. "You have an artist's name," her friends, Cheryl's and Jean's and Susan's all, used to tell her when they were girls. "You'll be a musician someday." And Dixie privately agreed, picturing an older, sleeker version of herself, thick knees hidden by a long velvet skirt in a smoky jazz club, at the piano. Barbara's whimsy, the very thing that attracted the girl's father, though it could not induce him to stay, manifested itself less and less as the girls grew. But it was rooted in their names, which held such promise, Dixie and Val, which was short for Valentine. And wasn't Val the sweetheart, too, when they were young? There was that rocky period when Dixie was in her last year of high school and dating a boy who was genuinely nice, and a part of her feared that she might actually stay, get knocked up and stay, which is what happened to girls who didn't take care. Like her sister, sweet Valentine, so much prettier, and look what had happened to her. One night, the summer after they had graduated, Dixie and this boy, Tim his name was, drove out to the woods to smoke a joint and make love, and Dixie threw her lit cigarette out of the bed of Tim's truck. To see what would happen, to dare what would happen, so enraged was she by the strictures of this place. She flipped the cigarette, laughing, and it was a dry summer, and the grass caught, and a blighted jack pine with its drab brown needles, and that is how she had started a fire. No one save Tim knew she'd done it, though the fire, which burnt part of the forest and several working fields before it was extinguished, was referred to as the burn for years after. They beat at the flames with their jackets, and when it became apparent that the blaze could not be overcome, She and Tim drove to town and hunted up the sheriff, who drank beers at the Rusty Nail most nights after 8. That is where they found him, his butt lapping over the third stool from the window where it always was, and his hand holding the beer stayed in the air when he saw the excitement and fear in their faces. They told him a story about driving past and seeing the queer orange lick of flames, and since they were both good students, they were believed. Tim loved her then. Dixie understood that. She had never for a moment doubted that he would keep her secret. The volunteer firefighters were rounded up, and because the excitement was infectious, because this had not happened in their lifetime, Tim and Dixie went back to watch them dig the ditches and spray the flames. They knew all the men who fought that fire. Tim ended up by helping too, and Dixie brought them water, that line of men, some of them enemies in their day-to-day existence, united, if briefly, by the blaze. She let them think they were heroes, part of something larger than themselves with their blackened faces and brawny arms. A part of her believed it too. The air smelled of char and also water. She cannot forget that. The next day, she rode her bike to the site alone to see the stinking trees. A haze hung over the burned place like smog, and no birds flew there. The forest was like a ruined cityscape, and Dixie was ashamed to realize that she didn't care. She wondered even then why Tim didn't break up with her, why he didn't draw away in revulsion at what she had done. He had always loved these woods. No, it was left to Dixie to do the leaving. She stayed with him until they went off to school, Tim to dental school in Illinois, and she, Dixie, to the music program in Madison, where she would find out soon enough that her musical gifts had limits. But their first Christmas back home, over mugs of cocoa cozily spiked with rum from Tim's parents' cupboard, Dixie still felt expansive with possibility. She told Tim she'd met someone else and that it was serious, which wasn't true, and that they'd slept together, which was. She'd watched dispassionately as Tim's honest face caved in on itself. She thought then that she had already separated from this place and the people who lived here. Above and beyond the car, the moon still, pasted to the sky, starchy white and melancholy. Enough, Tim was fine. He'd gotten his degree, moved back to Wisconsin, gotten married. When she has gone back to see her mother, she has heard this much. Dixie is hungry, and she has to pee, and there is an exit and a lighted place where she can probably get something to eat. Dixie gives herself permission to stop. She'll be back on the road in 10 minutes. She's thinking about breakfast, isn't she? Because she'd left home without coffee or food. She hadn't even washed her face. If someone had asked her, she'd say, honestly enough, that she wasn't thinking about how Val's clean little house will be cold because Val keeps the heat to 63. No, she isn't. Her thoughts are like lights on the surface of water. They are motes in a fire. There are motels in Ladysmith, certainly, and Dixie would rather stay in any one of them, but she is smart enough to know how that would look, not staying with her own sister. Dixie parks. A cluster of fast food joints rings together like covered wagons, red and yellow, their color insistent in the flat iron breast of the fields. Stretched over her is the sky, fey lavender now, belying the cold. When Dixie gets to Ladysmith, Val will have the house ready, stripes vacuumed rigorously into the rug. Dixie pulls her coat close. The air is wet, as heavy and gray as gravy. Water, she thinks. It smells like water.